All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining City and State's Home Essentials in the COVID-19 era. We're going to be talking about internet and utility policy for the pandemic. First and foremost, I want to thank our sponsor, AARP New York, for helping to put this event together. And I am Jeff Coltin, a senior reporter at City and State, and it's really my privilege to host so many state legislators and a representative from AARP today to talk about these issues. It's the coronavirus crisis. We just hit 1 year anniversary, really, and people are still staying home more than ever, which means that we're counting on our basic utilities more than ever. I don't have to tell anybody that's tuning into this how important high-speed internet is. We're talking about everyday work and meetings, and heck, even streaming Netflix at night. You need that entertainment. You need that high-speed internet, and of course, on top of that, we're talking heat, hot water, all the basics. So we're going to jump into all of that today. But first, because we have so many elected officials, I'd like everybody to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go around, and I would like everybody here to, what is my prompt? Sorry. Everybody here to briefly introduce themselves, say, your name, where you represent, and then also tell us briefly your personal or professional connection to the issue of home essentials and utilities, whether that's your committee membership or a story of, a loved one who's gotten their electricity shut off. Tell me your personal or professional connection to this issue in particular. And I will start at the top of my screen with Assemblymember Hunter. Go ahead.
Started off wrong. I'm sorry, muted. Sorry, good morning, Pam Hunter, representing from the 128th Assembly District here in Syracuse. I do sit on the Energy Committee with our great chair, Mike Cusick. Really, I have a high concentration of poverty for communities of color, and it's a Rust Belt city. We have a lot of old properties. Electric utility bills are very high. We have a huge amount of students in the city center that are not in school every day. So the reliability of Wi-Fi and broadband width is not good. If you have 2-3 kids at home, they're not all able to have reliable Wi-Fi. And that's one thing that we absolutely need to crack down on. And people are in arrears with their utilities. There was a rate increase for National Grid. We had an increase a few years back, and we have another one on deck right now. People are hurting. And so this is going to be a great conversation to kind of flesh out some of that stuff and make more people aware about what's going on.
Thank you so much. Over to Assemblymember Paulin.
Hi, everyone. I represent the 88th Assembly District, which is in southern Westchester. And the role I really have, though, is as the corporation's chair, which you say, how is that related to broadband? Well, it is. So it's part of the scope of the committee. So we've been looking at all of the access and affordable issues, which is a great deal of concern to the Assembly Conference. And we're going to be introducing some legislation, actually just introduced one bill, introducing another one shortly, to try to deal with some of the problems.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing more about that. Over to Senator Parker, please.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. I'm the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, as well as the Majority Whip in the New York State Senate. And like my colleagues have been working on many of these issues, in particular, I drafted and passed, with the help of my good friend Mike Cusick, a bill on the utility moratorium in the state of New York. We were one of the first states to pass a utility moratorium. We actually just in the Senate passed an extender and a little bit of an upgrade to that moratorium. And now are about to put in a package of bills that deals with the arrears on many of these issues: gas, electric, water, telephone, broadband, and working with my colleagues on this call also to deal with the issue of broadband affordability, as well as build out, all of which have been critical issues that have been exasperated in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much. Over to Senator Comrie.
Good morning. First, I want to thank the City and State and AARP for allowing me to be on the panel. Good morning to all my colleagues and everyone that is watching or listening. I am honored to be the state senator for the 14th district in Southeast Queens, encompassing the communities of Laurelton, Cambridge Heights, Springfield Gardens, Hollis, St. Albans, Queens Village, Jamaica, Briarwood, Hollis Hills, and Hillcrest. I serve on, I'm the Senate Corporation's chair, so I have oversight of the utility companies when working along with Senator Parker. And I also have a couple of bills that are regarding trying to deal with the issues of broadband, because I'm aware of the issues of broadband all over the state, especially upstate, but even within my district, as Senator Hunter said, with families that have multiple children in school. And I also have a bill that's requiring that we provide free internet in households with students that live below the poverty line, and also dealing with a bill that would reimburse customers for major outages when in a more timely fashion, and working with the Senate on the other package of bills to try to make sure that we can have better cable access. And also my office, especially during the pandemic, have been working with seniors that don't have cable access or computer savvy to help them, number one, dealing with their food insecurities, with their communication with their families, and now with getting them on the vaccination list, where I've had volunteers calling seniors and my staff calling seniors so that we can get them signed up, utilizing volunteers. And we're always looking for volunteers. I'll just put that out there too, that are willing to call seniors in my community to get them signed up so that they can get the vaccination, because they don't have the internet savvy or even basic internet, because they're on a fixed income. And they really, that's a real issue that we have to delve into also. How do we make sure that seniors on a fixed income can even get the internet capacity needed at a low cost so that they can keep up with what's going on in the world? Thank you for having me on the panel.
Sure, and I'm glad you brought up vaccines. We'll definitely be touching upon that later as well. Over to Assemblymember Cusick.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and it's great to be here and part of this panel. I want to thank City and State and AARP for holding this and for joining my colleagues. I look forward to a great discussion today as we move forward and move forward out of the pandemic, and it's important that we have these discussions right now. I'm the proud representative state assemblyman for the 63rd Assembly District in Staten Island, and I am the chair of the Assembly Standing Committee on Energy. So I look forward to today's discussion, and hopefully we can come up with some legislation that will help our seniors and all New Yorkers.
Thank you. Over to Senator Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I too want to thank City and State and AARP for hosting this wonderful forum here today. My name is Tim Kennedy. I'm the senator for the 63rd State Senate District, way out here in Western New York, in Buffalo, the town of Cheektowaga, and the city of Lackawanna. I referred to my colleagues earlier before we started. You know, Buffalo is the new Miami of the North. Come visit us if you haven't been out here. Great things are happening. But you know, I'm the chair of transportation in the New York State Senate. I also have the great honor and privilege to serve with my colleagues, including the chair, Senator Parker, on the Energy Committee. And as such, it touches on so many different aspects of our lives, the broadband internet connectivity, but also as chair of transportation, I've moved all around the state in dealing with transportation issues. And when I'm moving around the state, one of the things that unfortunately we recognize across the state, whether it's urban communities, suburban communities, or rural communities, that there are deep discrepancies and disparities in the availability and accessibility of the broadband internet and the level to which people can connect to others across this state, nation, and the globe. And what this pandemic has done is it has exacerbated so many of the issues that we already knew. And it brought to the forefront those injustices, quite frankly, economic injustices and so many other injustices in our communities. And, much like Assemblywoman Hunter, who mentioned her district, my district, very urban based out here in Buffalo, has many problems with deep poverty and those that don't have internet accessibility. And so when this pandemic hit, one of the things I can tell you, a quick story, is that the children in the Buffalo Public Schools and the surrounding community that needed internet access to get into their schools and to get their education, we had to get through those problems that existed. So whether we created temporary hubs for them to be educated in that had internet access, or we worked with the Buffalo schools to make sure everyone had a tablet to gain internet access, we found solutions. But we have a great problem across this state, and it's broadband internet interconnectivity. And so we want to make sure we're doing everything in our power to resolve this issue, because the only way we're going to hit our economic potential in New York State is if we make us a leader in broadband connectivity. So I'm really honored to be a part of this panel discussion here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Assemblymember Jean-Pierre.
Good morning to City State. Thanks for having me, and to its viewers. I represent the 11th Assembly District, which is Central Long Island, encompasses within Suffolk County. I am the chair of Libraries and Education Technologies, and we're there in that committee, as Kennedy said and all my colleagues mentioned before, broadband access to our kids. Our libraries are the hub. Some libraries particularly have put their broadband in a plaza so their students can access, and with COVID-19 and not having the ability to have students in the library is detrimental, because many kids use the library for after school services to get their homework done, to utilize the computers, to utilize the internet. And then I also sit on the great committee that Amy Paulin chairs, corporations, and I'm looking forward to New York being the leader, as Senator Kennedy said, for broadband. We need to be at a different place. I think that COVID-19 has taught us, is giving us a lesson where we should be and where we're not. So I look forward to the discussion with my colleagues and answering the viewers' questions. Thank you.
And thank you. Over to Bill Ferris.
Thank you. Thanks, City and State, for joining us, and the legislators for being on this morning. ARP has always been concerned about the high cost of energy, and the pandemic has only made this worse. And what we found out, ARP, during this pandemic is how important it is to have access to affordable internet and broadband. And looking very forward to this conversation about those two topics. Glad to see we have the chairs of the major committees in the Assembly that oversee these issue areas, and members of those committees, and I think will be a good discussion. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
And thank you. And do you just want to say that State Senator Jessica Ramos was supposed to join us today, but had to drop out because of a family emergency. So she sends her regrets. And look, thank you to everybody who's watching. I already see some activity in the chat on Zoom. By all means, please keep that going. Just make sure that you toggle it to panelists and attendees so everybody can see what you're saying. And if you have questions, please put them in the Zoom Q&A and upvote your favorites. I'm going to try and grab one or two from the Q&A there. So if you have a question, please put it there. But I want to ask my own question first, and it was mentioned in the introduction there, the moratorium on utility terminations. Last I saw, it was due to expire March 31st. I know that we've just been kind of extending it. I think Senator Parker said it was being extended. So I just want to open up that conversation. What's the latest on the moratorium on utility terminations? And I also saw that in the budget this year, the governor has proposed a kind of permanent ban on utility terminations, electric, gas, water, telecommunications, and cable and internet, whenever an area is under a state of emergency. I'm wondering if anybody wants to go farther, just to ban certain terminations, even when you're not under a state of emergency, what the answers are there. So I'll open that up to anybody who has thoughts on the moratorium.
Well, let me go first because we did submit the bill and draft it. So the moratorium bill, and we actually have now submitted actually two bills. One is a bill that deals with gas, electricity, and water, and then a second bill that now deals with internet services, which wasn't covered in the first set of legislation. And this current bill goes to December of this year, December 31st to 2021. And we are looking and having some conversation about emergencies going forward. But in the moment, we just feel like we should be trying to deal with this current emergency and then deal with the issues of arrears, which is going to be the next looming problem. And I believe that the utility moratorium has been passed out of the Senate and is now in the People's House, waiting for them to complete their work.
So I'll chime in here because that issue comes into my committee in the Assembly. And we are also looking at pulling it out of the budget. Just so that everyone who's watching this is aware, the reason that broadband was left out the first time is because we didn't think that we had the ability at the state to have oversight. So now that the PSC has recognized that there can be oversight, they believe that there can be, we are also going to be adding that in. So it wasn't that it was done by mistake. We really believed at the time that we didn't have the authority. So we're going to be working with the Senate. Our intent is to pull it out of the budget as well. And, hopefully, I agree, getting something done for this year, and then we can go forward. I don't think that, like the Senate, we're not going to extend this to just any emergency. We want some legislative oversight. I think that's come out loud and clear from our both conferences. So, that's the plan.
I can also weigh in here, Jeff, and just sort of to clarify everything that's already been said as well. A few weeks ago, the Senate majority passed an extensive package that extends the COVID-19 moratorium for utility service disconnections, holds utilities accountable for failures in restoring service, ensures that utility companies don't pass on the cost of legislative lobbying efforts onto their customers, and clarifies that medical equipment that qualifies for essential electric service. So these bills also ensure that customers are compensated for service interruptions and provide a voice for the consumer. And that's all within the Public Service Commission and strengthens the standards for utility service provider emergency response plans. So this is a package that requires new infrastructure projects to be approved by engineers and public oversight. So really, it's all about the ratepayers and the consumers at the end of the day, the work that we're doing in the legislature.
Right. I'd like to jump into here. In my capacity as chair of the Energy Committee, we did get a lot of folks who reached out. And as one of my colleagues mentioned before, this pandemic really amplified issues that were there that we didn't really see in the past. But when a state of emergency had happened, it really amplified the need for focus on the utilities, particularly when it comes to the bills and the charging of our ratepayers. This was a lifeline for many folks, this moratorium. I know in my own district, many seniors and many folks who are not seniors, this saved them having this moratorium. The big issue moving forward with all these packages of bills that we now are going to be tasked with going forward is also the arrears, as Senator Parker mentioned, because a lot of folks now are going to owe large chunks of money. And we really do have to focus on that too, on how we're going to work with the utilities. And many of the utilities have reached out to myself and some of my colleagues who they want to work with us to come up with something that's a balance in helping people pay those arrears. So this isn't going to be an ongoing issue. And it's certainly something that I think we all would support in any time of a state of emergency, that a moratorium on utilities is very important and is a proven lifeline for many of our seniors.
Jeff, I just wanted to jump in because I think one of my colleagues had mentioned the Public Service Commission, and I have always had a longstanding issue, with the PSC. There needs to be more public and service with the Public Service, Commission. And I think that we need to be able to have a conversation how the legislation and policy we're talking about and negotiating with the utilities actually gets back to the ratepayers, to our consumers, to our constituents, because we have issues in our communities that the landlords aren't aware of what the policies are. We have people getting their power shut off, or even worse, we've had landlords going and cutting wires, turning off boxes, to the electricity because they're not, paying. We've had instances where people have perished because the landlords cut off the power and people were using an oven and candles to try to heat their home. So there needs to be better communication that trickles down. We're making policy, and I think it's great. Very concerned about the arrears. People are not going to be able to afford thousands and thousands upon dollars. Yes, we're going to be, getting a lot of financial stimulus money coming in, but that needs to trickle down to our consumers. And my fear is this heavy debt from rent, heavy debt from utilities, heavy debt from cable. We're not even talking about that. We're just talking about the power company. It's going to be insurmountable, and it's just going to keep poor people poor. So I think that needs to be part of the conversation too. We're passing great legislation, but the end user needs help and needs to know where to go to when we're passing all of this.
I'd like to expand on what you just mentioned, the arrears. I mean, I think there are programs right now to help New Yorkers pay for certain utilities, right, to make ends meet. Are the plans now then just to kind of boost those existing programs, or what's available out there for somebody who, is behind on their electric bill and is going to have trouble making it?
Right.
Yeah, Jeff, I just wanted to jump in very quickly back to the arrears, and ARP could not agree more with the discussion right now that arrears is really the next big issue on utilities. It's we work with an organization, the Public Utility Law Project, PULP, and they did a report in August, several months ago, and they found in their report, when looking at this through PSC data, that there's over 1 million New Yorkers that are 60 days or more behind on their utility bill. So that stat alone, when we look at that stat, and I'm sure the legislators here today are aware of it, that is very troubling to know that. And it's millions and millions of dollars that is owed. So what happens when the moratorium is over? What happens when people have to start paying the bill again? It's not going to be a good situation in New York. I'm very happy to hear that this is totally on the radar of our elected officials, because it's going to be a problem, big problem.
And if I could just chime in too, we don't want people to have to choose between putting food on the table and to paying utilities, because we've seen a large number of food insecurities in areas where our food banks were not serving, are serving. So, we have to look at the issue holistically, and that's the key approach.
Right. So right now there's about $1.14 billion worth of arrears when we start talking about all of those people that Bill is referring to, right? And so at some point it starts to become a real number in terms of money that we need. Thankfully, politically, I think we've done a good job by electing President Biden and Vice President Harris. We have a very generous stimulus package that's come through, including money in the stimulus package that actually help address some of these issues, right? And so there's about $3.2 billion of emergency broadband benefit funds that are available that will help mostly, both with access, but also, dealing with some of those issues. And then there's another $7.2 billion for schools and library funds. But there also will be funds to deal with gas and electricity and water. And we're now trying to see where we are with, telephone bills and cell service and those kind of things. But there are some funds there. And I think that there will probably be, and to be honest with you, the reality is that the folks on this panel. Great, thank God y'all brought us together because we haven't actually talked to each other about this shit. I was actually kind of embarrassed as I was thinking about this. Like, we really probably should have a conference call to start talking about our different approaches. But my sense is that there will be some programs utilizing the federal funds to address these issues, alongside with some of the with some help from the utilities themselves to chip in a little bit and provide some forgiveness or some resources towards these arrears. Because again, these New Yorkers came into hard times because of this pandemic, because no fault of their own. And so we should certainly provide the kind of relief that they need in order to keep them on their feet.
It does feel like spring is here, right? Both in terms of weather and also in terms of money from the federal government. I think there's lots of programs that will now be, renewed and coming alive. So sorry, back to any thoughts on.
I was going to refer to PULP as a great option for people, and we need to continue to make sure that they can stay funded in the budget and get an increase. We also have the HEAT program. There are other programs that the gas company does have some programs that will provide temporary relief. Con Ed does have a program for temporary relief, but the issue of making sure that the utility companies can understand that they're going to have to do some forgiveness in this process, that this is not, the pandemic only highlighted what we've already known in my community, that, when a person calls you about a utility bill, all of their bills and their home is probably in foreclosure as well. So there needs to be a comprehensive package of services that we need to put together in the state, hopefully with federal efforts to make sure that we can continue this, and we can hopefully continue to extend the moratorium for those folks that truly are in trouble. And we find out that, as I said earlier, they're in trouble across the board in multiple categories. So we really need to figure out a package. I know that there are various bills that are being organized, and Senator Parker is right. We do need to sit down and huddle between the houses. We've been unfortunately distracted by other things at the moment, but hopefully we can get together before this budget is adopted, and also come up with a package that can make sure we look at that holistically.
One of the other things that I think it's important for us to mention in cities like mine and many of the other colleagues on here, we have really old housing. My house was built in 1928. And if we don't have, this can be transformational for us with the stimulus dollars. And the grant programs that are available through NYSERDA don't go far enough. And if there's a way that we could put some more funding, because people, it's just like opening your window in the winter and just letting the hot air out. If you don't have the appropriate insulation, the right roofing, the right windows in your home, this problem is because of the pandemic. But the people who are in this crisis, especially renters, it just continue, and it will keep continuing until we can do better for all of our old housing stock. And a lot of landlords aren't going to put in the necessary weatherization and improvements for energy efficiency, even though they were able to get credits, right along, and in order to make it more affordable for their tenants. If you're getting a $600, $700, $800 heat bill, in the winter, and that's equivalent to your rent, what are you going to pay? And I think that needs to be part of our conversation too.
Well, I want to shift over specifically to talking about internet infrastructure too. I'm very happy. Recently, my building was wired up for Verizon internet. So for the first time in my life, I actually get to choose between two internet providers. I don't think I've ever had this option before, but I know not everybody in the city or statewide certainly has that option. It's just one provider. I'm wondering, what role does that play in internet affordability and, even for those that only do have one choice? Are there any plans or any solutions in the state to keep internet affordable and make sure that prices don't go out of control, especially as we're all sitting at home and streaming Netflix every night?
Yeah, Jeff, you know that right now the digital divide literally is the biggest inequity that we're dealing with in our state, literally. And access to high-speed broadband has become as necessary as gas, electricity, and water. We would never have anybody move into a house in this day and age, and not in our great state, without access to reliable and affordable gas, electricity, and water. And that now has extended to the internet. And right now, again, in the midst of this pandemic, as we have seniors and frontline workers who are trying to get access to the vaccine, you heard Senator Comrie talk about the work that he's doing in his own office, and many of us are doing that kind of work, just trying to connect our seniors in our communities with appointments, and like for us to have a system that's predicated on internet access, doesn't make any sense, but that's another conversation. But it's created a dynamic where literally for your health, you need to have this. If you lost your job because of the pandemic and you're looking for a new job, you can't be a proper job seeker without access to high-speed internet. And of course, we know our children, our students, many of the people on this call have children at home who are dependent on high-speed internet in order to do their work. And so, this has become a real necessity. This is no longer just kind of a convenience. This is really, really a necessity, and we really, and the state legislature, have to start addressing it in that way. Certainly, in my community, we've done that, and I know in the assembly that there's similar conversations. And so, part of what you saw in the governor's executive package is a broadband affordability proposal. In the Senate, we're actually proposing that we pull that out and do it separately, and do some things that are a little bit more robust than what even the governor has proposed. Not that what he proposed was bad, but we think there's some other pieces of it that we should put together and go forward with. And so that's kind of been our plan to kind of address the issue of affordability. And certainly you heard both Assemblymember Hunter and Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre talk about the access problems. We have a mapping bill that we're looking at, but we really need to look at where there are cold spots. And there are many in rural areas, suburban areas, and urban areas, believe it or not, where there's cold spots. And so we need to deal with both the build out piece, but then also the affordability piece that's making the adoption of high-speed internet available for every New Yorker and the way it should be.
And I'll just say on the Assembly side, a few things. We're following a similar model. We're pulling it out of the budget, and again adding to what the governor has suggested, because one of the, I think, impetuses behind what we have in the executive budget is, again, recognizing that there's an ability for the PSC to have some oversight, but it can be improved. So, for example, in the governor's budget, it's a $15 plan for 25 bits. 25 bits couldn't even get you on this Zoom. It's very low. And in fact, it doesn't even match what the order is. There was a merger, as you know, for Altice, and in that merger, there was an agreement that they provide for $14.99, 30 bits. So, but the other cable company was not included. Obviously, they didn't have a merger. So one of the impetuses, I think, behind the governor's plan is to include them, and and it probably should be 30, just because that's the minimum. But even having said that, that doesn't do much. And one of the things that we've done in our committee is we did a study, which we're going to release soon, of the entire state using self-reporting data from the census to understand better what the access and affordability areas are. We can't really assess from that data whether it's no internet at all, or no broadbands at all, or whether it's access to higher bits. So we do need a more comprehensive study, and the Assembly is going to be putting a bill in the budget to address trying to get at that study. But we're also very impressed with what the FCC has put out, which is a $50 plan or a $50 discount for anybody or for broadband companies to offer. So so somebody can get a higher speed and get that reduction for a certain poverty level. So I think the concern we have is that not everyone perhaps is going to participate. It's optional at the federal level. So we're going to be putting out a bill to require that they participate in the federal program. So it gives everyone in New York that option. And also, again, then there's some oversight locally or statewide, so we're looking at all of those same issues. And, I think after this very good panel discussion, the Senate and the Assembly is going to be even more motivated to work together, because we're hearing we're all on the same page in terms of wanting to do something. So I think you've done a great job in bringing us together. Thank you.
Jeff, I just wanted to mention two things. And from ARP's perspective, it's always good that the Senate and the Assembly are on the same page during budget time. So that's very good. One thing you said, Senator Parker, was about the vaccination site. To ARP, that's a perfect example of why internet access, high-speed internet access is very important, because as we all know, when that first came out, people, if you didn't have access to the internet, you couldn't go to the site, and the only thing available was a phone call. And if you called the phone, you were on the phone for 4 or 5 hours trying to get an appointment. So I think it's, from that perspective, having access to the internet is crucial, obviously, for the school districts, and also from an isolation standpoint from ARP. One thing that we've learned in this pandemic is a lot of seniors were staying at home. The only communication they had with the outside world was either through the phone or through the internet. And that is crucial to have the access to that. But also is the telehealth. We all know telehealth became very prominent during the pandemic. And actually the state is moving more and more through the Medicaid program and the commercial insurers for health insurance to push forward with telehealth. And so you can't have really good telehealth if you don't have access to the internet or good communication. So it's equally important. And it's good to hear that that the affordability issue will get done, whether it's in the budget or outside the budget, because $15 a month for very low speed, in ARP's opinion, really doesn't cut it. What that magical number is of a monthly fee, we're not sure, but certainly the higher you can go, 25, 50, 75, 100 is key to having really good connection to the internet. So I was glad to hear that.
And I'd like to mention as well here, a number of my colleagues have talked about the work that we've been doing. I really want to give Senator Parker and Senator Comrie on the Senate side great credit for the work. They've really been tremendous leaders in our chamber. We worked to advance a bill last year, and I know the Assembly did the same. We passed it in both houses. I think everybody on this call here today was supportive of it, the Comprehensive Broadband Connectivity Act, which ultimately would study where these inequities were happening across the state in broadband coverage by requiring the PSC to look at the availability and the affordability of high-speed internet in New York. Sadly and unfortunately, that bill was pocket vetoed by the governor, which is a fancy way of saying he didn't sign it. And so we're back to square one in that regard. However, all is not lost. We continue to drive this message forward. We're coordinating our efforts. And one of the things that we're looking at right now, especially, and I know the Biden administration was mentioned, the relief package that's coming was mentioned, but there's another relief package on its way, and it's going to be in the form of a federal highway bill of $2 to $3 trillion. That's going to focus on infrastructure and roadways. And, I mentioned the transportation chairmanship that I have the honor and privilege to be in. But, when it comes to internet connectivity, that's going to play a crucial role in making sure that our communities have that access to the internet. And Senator Parker mentioned that internet is not a luxury. This is a necessity these days. You need it for everything. And, I've recently introduced legislation that'll implement a dig once policy here in the state of New York, which would require any highway project that receives state funding to include the installation of conduits that are suitable for fiber optic cables or wireless facilities that will support broadband services. According to the FCC, the largest cost for deploying broadband is burying those fiber optic cables and that conduit underground. And the Federal Highway Administration has indicated that 90% of the cost in deploying the broadband services is incurred by this work being done in significant excavation of roadways. So, when we are able to coordinate through a dig once policy like the one I'm putting forward, highway construction projects with the installation of broadband facilities, New York State has the potential to save an incredible amount of money on costs incurred by repeated excavation. And this coordination will also help to reduce deployment time by preventing the need to acquire duplicative reviews and permits for the work that's being done at the same location. So it mandates the inclusion of broadband conduit plastic pipes, which, house these fiber optic cables during construction. So, we're making sure that we're doing our part. None of this is simple, but it's simply connecting the dots, quite frankly. And as the demand for this high quality, affordable broadband only increases throughout New York State, and the technology continues to advance, it's incumbent upon us in New York, particularly in the legislature, as we're doing here today, to maximize the use of our ability in the legislature. And quite frankly, this legislation will allow us to move forward and use those right-of-ways that the state owns to our advantage. It'll provide a long-term savings and really aid in the economic development by putting forward a program that highlights the need for broadband, but really is a solution that every community, no matter if it's urban, suburban, or rural, will be able to take advantage of.
I just wanted to make a comment because Bill had said something very important relative to telemedicine, and I chair the Health and Long-Term Care Committee for our National Council for Insurance Legislators, and we do have a model telehealth expansion piece of legislation that we're working on. But one of the biggest issues, and Senator Kennedy mentioned it, and we all keep talking about, is the infrastructure issue. And we had the conversation, and as someone mentioned, the Public Service Commission, relative to the information they were supposed to provide in the survey that they were supposed to conduct relative to what is the percentage of access that people have. And the number they came out with was about 90-some% of people were covered with connectivity. And that's absolutely untrue. Go talk to somebody who lives in the North Country. Go visit Lake Placid or Lake George or someplace in the Adirondacks with your phone and see if 90% of the people you're with can use their phone, because they can't. They don't have access. Absolutely, they don't. And so that information isn't right. My fear is we're going to get this money. The Public Service Commission says, but 90% of the people, are already, connected. So we don't really need to extensively do this. And it is not accurate. It's more than just the last mile. People in rural areas don't have access. I'm sitting in my district office right now, and there's a great chance that this computer is going to just crap out at any minute because it is not a stable connective line. And reliability is important. And that $15 they were talking about relative to the plan, well, is that $15 per each kid you have in your house that needs to utilize the service? You got 3 kids, they all have to be on remote school at the same time. How does that work? We need to do better. But if we're not dealing with accurate information from the Public Service Commission, we're not going to be making smart decisions on our infrastructure plans.
Now, I do see a question in the Q&A, which is an interesting one, because I don't know about 5G. Somebody's wondering, how is New York State ensuring equitable delivery of 5G to residents? So as this new system is rolling out across the state, is there a statewide plan to make sure that it is rolled out equitably?
Well, I can tell you what I just mentioned, the dig once policy will be a statewide policy. And when you're talking about the high cost of putting in these conduits in every community, and we're talking about a massive highway infrastructure bill coming from the federal level, as well as a record highway capital plan that our conference and the Assembly conference is working on right now. Everyone on this phone everyone on this webinar is working toward. I mean, there is going to be money available for road projects. And when we do those road projects, it has to be a major priority of us to address these inequities in broadband service in local communities. And doing a dig once policy will address that.
As it relates to 5G and both the deployment, there's actually numbers of levels that we have to look at this equity issue, right? So one has to be the deployment of the small cell technology that's used in 5G, mostly on buildings and telephone poles that exist already, and making sure that they are put in the right places. There's also some privacy issues that have to be addressed, I think, in the state. And that's certainly been a big conversation. And so we're kind of not quite there. The conversations are happening, but there isn't a kind of overarching policy or plan in this moment as of yet, although we're kind of moving in that direction, both in terms of access and but actually is access, equity, and the issue of privacy.
Yeah, from ARP's perspective, both the Assemblywoman said, I mean, there needs to be a mapping bill. That bill should have never been vetoed. I think Senator Kennedy said that. That was, I believe everybody on the conference here today voted for that bill. I think only one member of the legislature voted against it. And it's my understanding they voted against it. They, didn't think it was strong enough, but that was a very good bill, bipartisan support. Just requiring the PSC to do a study to look at where the gaps are, look at the affordability, look at the download and upload speeds. And, hopefully the legislature will address that, whether in the confines of the budget or outside. But couldn't agree more that if we're going to spend federal money and we're going to make internet accessible to people and affordable to people, we really need to know where it exists and where it doesn't exist and what the speeds are. Because all that investment, all that work by the legislature, we literally need a roadmap to the internet and where it is in New York. And I think without that, a lot of these efforts, may not come to fruition and help people. So couldn't agree more. That bill should have never been vetoed. We were very upset by that.
Again, according to Chairwoman Paulin, she indicated it. We in both houses we have agreed that legislation should go forward, and it will happen one way or another, whether it's in the budget or outside the budget. We certainly are going to bring that forward. We certainly have the kind of majority now that we think we can get it done, even outside of the objections of the executive. So we'll see. It will get done, and we agree with you wholeheartedly that we really have to have something that produces a report that shows us where things are going, so that we can start looking at costs and looking at developing real plans. And how do we, frankly, with all due respect, force the ISPs and the companies to serve every single New Yorker? And right now, we just can't allow them to cherry pick and give great service in places in which they know they can make money and pick communities, whether they're rural communities or whether they're Black and Latino communities, and decide that they don't think they're going to make quite as much money, and so they don't want to serve them. It can't happen that way. And certainly under the watch of the people I know who are on this call, who I know all care about these equity issues, whether it's poverty or whether it's racial, we'll make sure that it gets done.
Brings a question to mind. I feel like every 6 months or so, I see a headline where the governor is saying, we will kick out this utility of the state. We'll kick out Con Edison. We'll kick out Spectrum because they're underperforming or they did something wrong. Is the governor posturing, or would the state actually ever kick out a major utility in order to hold them accountable?
The Senate will yield to the Assembly, who's in charge of kicking things out.
I think our chair from the Energy Committee would actually probably have the most information relative to that question.
Well, Jeff, let me just say.
Let's let Senator Parker. I yield to the senator.
All right, so let me just say this. I think that we have mostly been working on a market model. The thing that most of us will probably agree on in market models, competition has been the thing that actually has given us the best outcomes, right? My father used to always tell me and my brothers, when he made us fight over things, that competition breeds success, right? So we believe that. So, right, so one of the bills I put forward actually this year is a municipal broadband bill for New York City that would allow New York City to build out, and I've done this in cooperation with the mayor there, and I know other places like Syracuse are interested in similar legislation, but to do something that allows municipal broadband to happen in order to create that competition and also let smaller ISPs compete in the marketplace. And we believe that will both lower costs and raise the quality of the services that people are getting. And so that's really the approach that we're taking as opposed to a stick approach.
Yeah, and you know, I believe also, and I'm sure my colleagues from the Assembly echo what Senator Parker said, that you know, competition is good. You know, and you know, calling utilities out where there are deficiencies or negative impacts on our communities is very important. I do think it's needed in a way that it includes the legislature and it includes the executive branch, that it's not just one branch that's doing this. It needs to be a comprehensive approach that all branches are involved in. But I do think, because there are areas that, you know, our utilities do provide a lifeline to our residents and our constituents in the terms of energy. But it's our job to call them out when we think there are problems. And if one way to do that is to say, you know, we are going to take a closer look whether we need you or not, that is going to be something that we have to do as a legislative body.
And there is legislation out there looking at how to make sure that we make these companies more responsible, and also improve the Public Service Commission so that we can give them broader powers to be able to have more, to increase penalties, to make sure that they are following through on responsibilities, and also to give us more regular reporting on how they're looking at and reviewing these utility companies also, so that we can have a better gauge on what we want to do it on a, you know, there is also you know, certain states have taken over their utility companies, and there's folks that are looking at that as a concept also. You know, that's a broader stroke brush that a lot of folks are saying that we couldn't even afford to do as a state. You know, that I have to be honest, that you know, some of the folk that are that are against it say that, you know, with state agencies are horrible now. Just look at what happened with unemployment last year when everybody was trying to get unemployment benefits. So they're a bit leery of the state managing anything at that level as well. But if we can make the utilities responsible, we can make them transparent, and, you know, that just like we just passed a bill making sure that they can immediately reimburse people for loss of food when there's a power outage. You know, there's plenty of other things that we can do as a legislative body, pushing to make sure that the Public Service Commission is a more responsible and more adept agency at ferreting out problems with utility companies.
Mhm.
Interested in your reference of public power there. I mean, we know that there's been a big push by the Democratic Socialists of America and some other affiliated groups to, you know, turn, at least in New York City, like the whole electric and gas system over to the government. Wonder if anybody else has thoughts on that, and whether there's any appetite.
Well, I'll just expand what I said earlier. You know, that the state, just to look at again what happened with the unemployment, what happens with the other state agencies that people have been trying to access during the pandemic, their lack of ability to access it, the issue of whether or not services could be rendered in an efficient manner. You know, that's all things that we have to look at. You know, the cost of acquiring these services, whether or not there would be you know, whether or not that would make sense in the light of what we need to do with spending our budget dollars and looking at our resources. Those are all issues that, you know, we really need to take some hard look at before there's folks can recommend things, because, you know, they're looking in a small bubble. But if you look at a comprehensive picture of what the state needs in resources over the next few years, what we need to do just to bring foundation aid up to pay our CUNY folk that haven't been paid, other nonprofits that haven't had, you know, pay increases in their delivery of services. How do we maintain a state revenue and do everything we need to do as a state and then turn around and try to buy utility companies. We got to be, I think there's a smarter way to use our dollars, and with our there's a smarter way to use our legislative powers to make sure that these companies are delivering for us.
Yeah, Jeff, if you look at, so, I mean, first of all, the Senate actually has moved a bill out of committee that actually will begin a process of actually doing a study on the idea of public power in the state of New York, right? And so we're open to looking at it. We think that everything is on the table, right? And Leroy Comrie has actually been a leader on those issues, and certainly as the chair of the committee, I've been supportive of that. But let's look at the context. And so, you know, as we look at this, there's a couple of things that kind of glaringly become issues in the terms of understanding this. One of the things you just heard Senator Comrie talk about is the cost. Let's talk about one. We have probably about 10 or 11, utilities in the state of New York, right? Let's look at Con Ed. Con Ed as a concern in the state of New York is about $70 billion. If you paid cash, Jeff, you can get it for the rock bottom price of $50 billion, right? Okay. Let's look at when we had a problem with the MTA, and this is just the MTA. They said it was a $40 billion problem. We came up with, as a transportation mobility plan, about 29 billion out of a 40 billion problem, and said, let's start there and then we'll figure out where we're gonna get the money left later, let alone a $50 billion problem. And that's part of what Senator Comrie's talking about. And you have to do that in the context of competing priorities in the context of the state, right? So cost is one issue. Then there's this little pesky thing that the utilities have that's called a franchise, real fancy word for a contract, and they're very long term. They're not as easily broken as people may think that they are, and you certainly have to deal with that. I'm not clear that the investors and the stockholders of the utilities are going to go quietly into the night. That's a third.
New York had trouble even getting rid of Donald Trump's contracts with the golf course. Then this might be difficult too. I do see a couple of interesting questions in the chat that I do want to get to before we run out of time, and it's talking about this topic. People are wondering if there's a way to hold utilities accountable with like specific goals to see if they can meet. You know, talking about setting goals high, and if they don't reach it, then holding them accountable, and whether there's a meaningful way to know if we're getting the right level of service. Wondering, maybe I'll throw to Assemblyman Cusick for this, wondering if we have any thoughts on.
Well, we certainly in the Assembly, there are many bills in our committee that address this. We do have a number of members of the Assembly who have introduced bills that are accountability bills for our utilities, and there are a number that set benchmarks and set numbers as to where we would know they're delivering. So that it has always been a discussion in our House, and I know that we have many bills in our committee, and I'm sure that Chair Paulin has many in the corporations. But it is certainly something that our rank and file members of our conference have been very vocal about, and it's something that I know we've been talking with the Senate on specific bills.
Mm-hmm. With accountability, yesterday, I just passed for the third time, and hopefully the Senate will pass it, legislation just notifying public hearings for rate increases. I mean, so that's just simple, so people can chime into, their rate increases in their own respective municipality communities, counties. So that's just accountability, notifying your consumer of a public hearing on their bill of a public hearing. So take note of that, Kev.
One of my first stories I covered as a reporter was a Con Edison rate increase at the PSC. And actually, I talked to AARP for it. I remember they brought in a whole bunch of folks to advocate against the rate increase. So it's funny that that was years and years ago, and here we are today still discussing these issues. And AARP was certainly on it then. But hey, with that transition, I want to thank our sponsor, AARP, and also thanks so much to all the hundreds of you that have tuned in on Zoom and on Facebook for this great discussion. I know I learned a lot, and look, I'm lucky that my internet was here. It was high speed the whole time. I was able to get it all, and I'm glad that these legislators are keeping these issues on hand. If you liked this discussion, I want to give a note that City and State's hosting many more events. Next Thursday, we're having a nonprofit board con with New York Nonprofit Media at 1 p.m. That's free. So if you're watching this, you're involved in the nonprofit sector, can't recommend that enough. We're hosting another panel with AARP next Friday, a week from today, 10 a.m. That's a state legislative forum talking about the affordable housing crisis. I'm sure there's going to be great discussion there. So that is also free. You can look in the chat for registration. And beyond that, it's Women's History Month. So City and State's hosting an Above and Beyond event honoring 40 outstanding women across the state working in politics and government. And that is on the last day of the month, March 31st. That's also free. And that's always a really fun event. So looking forward to that. With that, I want to thank so much all of our panelists for giving us their time today on this crazy busy week in Albany. And, thank you to them, and thank you to anybody who tuned in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Stay safe,
Thank you.
everybody.